Hello lovely people, my name is Emma and today I'm bringing you a recommendations video for some translated fiction. So it is a goal of mine in 2020 to read more translated fiction. I want to read 20 titles over this year and I have a whole TBR video that I'll link down below. But when I was looking through my shelves I realised I have actually read a semi-decent amount of translated fiction kind of just historically over my reading lifetime, and what I wanted to do today was just talk about some of the really good translated fiction titles already on my shelves that I have read, in case you are someone who also wants to increase their translated fiction reading. The first one that we're going to talk about is the only one that I don't physically have a copy of today, and that is Human Acts by Han Kang. This was translated by Deborah Smiths. So Han Kang is quite popular on BookTube in general. Her other book, The Vegetarian, is very popular with a lot of people. It's not one that I personally like. I think Human Acts is much stronger. Human Acts tells the tale of a particular uprising in Korea. This is a book from South Korea, and it is a particular rebellion, and it is told from 6 different points of view within the rebellion. It's the kind of emotional, like really heart-wrenching book that you do need to be in the right frame of mind to go into, but it is absolutely stunning the whole way through. It is based on a true event. So that was one that was quite interesting. It's not something that I knew a crazy amount about beforehand, so that was very cool, and I really enjoyed how distinctive the voices were from the various different points of view. Like I've talked about on this channel before, I find mixed POV books sometimes quite frustrating if the author doesn't have the skill to really give a very defined voice to each one of the characters, but that is not the case with Han Kang. It is a very strong voice coming through for each one of them. And a lot of people have enjoyed her book, The Vegetarian, so whilst I personally didn't enjoy it, I would recommend that you check it out because I know I am in a minority for that fact. The next book I want to talk about is Frankenstein in Baghdad by Ahmed Sadawi, translated by Jonathan Wright. This, as the title suggests, is a retelling of the iconic classic Frankenstein story, but this time set in Baghdad in time of war. And basically it is a gentleman who decides to, because the authorities will not bury a body or like kind of do the proper funeral rites for a body if it is not found relatively whole, which is not always the case when you are in an environment that is suffering from a lot of bombings. Basically a gentleman takes it upon himself to assemble a full corpse out of various body parts he finds out on the street. That's gruesome in its own right, and then naturally, because this is a Frankenstein retelling, the creature comes to life. I think this is such a clever retelling as a way of looking at the kind of cost of war to civilians, and was a really interesting insight to the war in the Middle East. Very fascinating, but I also think it's very clever because if you have read the Frankenstein, the original, you will recognize a lot of the stylistic and structural components that Mary Shelley used being echoed in this book, and I think that that was such a clever way of having a nod to the original, and it gives you such a different way of approaching this story. Very powerful, very strong, and really cool. Then we have one that I've talked about quite a few times on this channel already before in a variety of different videos, and that's Sulfuric Acid by Amelia Nuthbaum. This was translated from the original French by Sean Whiteside, and this is a lovely little book that is kind of riffing off the idea of a 1984 kind of scenario, like an Orwellian sort of society, and it's where reality TV has got super dull, so they decide to do Concentration, which is essentially a concentration camp but made into like a Big Brother-esque reality TV show, and it's about the experience of the people within that. Obviously horrifying because of that. Wow, all of the books I've talked about so far have been horrifying. Not intentional. There can be lovely, fun, light-hearted translated fiction out there. I promise some is coming. But yeah, so very intense, very emotional, fascinating spin-off on the idea of the 1984 concept taken into a Big Brother reality TV world. Done so well and so powerfully, especially given how short it is. It really packs a punch. I said more fun ones were coming. This is a horrifying one as well. I'm so sorry. I do read cheerful books. This is The Dinner by Herman Koch, which was translated by Sam Garrett from the original Dutch. We've got quite a nice range of different languages going on here. So this is a very divisive book. It is the kind of Marmite style book where you either really love it or really hate it. Sorry, my entire camera has just gone like yellow tinged, but we can ignore that. This tells a tale of two upper middle class families, couples, where the husbands are related, they're brothers, and their teenage sons have got into a bit of a problem, shall we say. They have indeed broken the law and there's something happening there, but it is told over the course of this dinner that they are having, and they're having a very polite, proper sit-down meal in a very fancy restaurant. And it's the lovely weird mix of like discussing the terrible things that they've done, but also being overtly polite over the meal and all the different subtext and tensions. And not a crazy amount happens in it per se. It's very much like a character study, and all of the characters are just absolutely ruthlessly disgusting. Like, there is no moral compass. It's all about looking after your own and looking after your own family, and the fact that there really are no lines that these people won't cross to protect their sons. I think it's really just a scathing indictment of like the upper middle class in general, and how much money can make you get away with things. And I loved all of it. The subtext was just incredible. And but yeah, it is one that some people are going to completely loathe. If you have a problem with unlikable characters, don't read this book. Nobody in it is good. Okay, we are now going more light-hearted. I did promise that there would be a few. So this is Stefan Zweig's The Chess, also sometimes known as The Royal Game or A Game of Chess. It's translated from the Russian by Anitha Bell. So this is, again, a very, very short book, very sweet, and it is telling the tale of a gentleman who's on a cruise. He finds out that there's a chess master on board, and they basically end up in a game together. But as they're playing, this gentleman starts to offer suggestions from the outside, and it turns out he's even better at chess than the grandmaster himself. And it's about his story as to how he's got so good at chess, and why nobody knows about him in the grandmaster chess circuit. It's a lovely, lovely little tale. Again, really fun. I don't think you need to know a crazy amount about chess to be able to enjoy it, and it is such a quick, light-hearted, not even so much light-hearted because there are some quite intense moments in it, but just a really fascinating look at obsession and how dangerous it can be, basically. I don't want to say too much more because it's so hard to talk about a book this short without just spoiling you on literally the entire plot. But it's not going to take you very long to read it, so like seriously pick that one up. Then we have Familiar Things by Hwang Sok Yong. Right, this was translated from the Korean by Sora Kim Russell. So yes, apparently Hwang Sok Yong is one of Korea's most renowned authors, so I might need to check out more of their work. This was a really delightful tale of a young child called Bug-Eye who his mother loses her job, and basically they end up going and living on this trash island where all of the rubbish from the city that they live in gets sent to, and then people live on there sorting it out and going through and kind of scrapping various things. It's very dangerous to live on an island made of trash because as things are like decomposing and stuff like that, there are very sort of gas bubbles and it's all very dangerous. He naturally doesn't have the nicest life in the world, but there also seems to be something weird going on with ghosts on the island as well, and like baffling lights in the distance. And because our main narrator is so young, being only 14, it's a really joyful look through a young person's eyes at what is fundamentally at heart not a very good situation to be in, but is kind of kept joyful because of this 14-year-old's sort of image put over it. Really, really fascinating, very fun, has a really wonderful and weird and quirky ending. Again, like with so many of these titles, gets a bit intense and emotional at places. You know, we're talking about somebody in extreme poverty, so do be aware of that going in. But it really warmed my soul, and it was such a like lovely, fuzzy reading experience. Do you know what I mean by these kinds of books that just like, they feel like a warm hug when you're reading them, and there's just something so innocently joyful about it as a reading experience. So really, really wonderful. Okay, and the last one's going to come as no surprise, and is most definitely the most light-hearted book on this entire list. Most of them have been very heavy going, but if you're looking for sheer absurdist fantasy fun that you cannot go wrong with, you need to read Walter Mörs. So Walter Mörs is a German author, and this was translated by John Brownjohn. That's a great name. This is book one in his Zamonia series, although they are standalone books. I also have Remo on my shelf, cracking book as well, and it is very similar in vein to people like Terry Pratchett or Tom Holt. You're looking at an absurdist fantasy world where our wonderful main character, Captain Bluebear, is telling you about the 13 and a half lives he's had. So he starts off on an island which is haunted by hobgoblins which devour people's tears, so he learns to become a professional crier for them to keep himself alive. At one point he ends up shipwrecked, no, sorry, he ends up like marooned in the sea on a raft, and then makes friends with some waves. The city of Atlantis features very heavily. There is falling through dimensions, there's running away from an absolute gigantic spider the size of a house, there's a gentleman with 7 brains. It's all just generally wacky, crazy, chaotic fun. It is so silly and wonderful, and I love the world that Walter Moers builds, and I cannot recommend him like enough. He is one of my all-time favorite authors, so definitely give this one a go. I also read this as a kid, believe it or not, even though it's beefy. I read it when I was like 10, which is insane to think about. So if you do have any children or young readers, this is definitely one that they would enjoy. So there you have it. There are just some lovely translated fiction books that I've already read before this year that I wanted to mention, as I am trying to increase my translated fiction. Have you read any of these? Where would you like, are any of them kind of added to your TBR now? Based on the stuff that I've read, do you have any more translated fiction recommendations? Trying to hit 20 this year, so I need to keep an eye out for them and make sure I'm reading plenty. And do scan your shelves to see how many books that you've read that you might not realise were actually translated fiction, because there are a couple on this list that I had no idea were not originally written in English, and that was a really interesting experience to go through and try and find. For example, Walter Moers, I should have really twigged that he was translated fiction. Like, I've loved him for literally over a decade now, and it never really resonated that, hey, he doesn't write in English. So yes, that's just a cool thing to notice. That's pretty much it from me. Have a wonderful reading week, and I'll chat to you soon. Bye.